Hi, everyone. This is Sara with Croatians Online. We're really excited to be bringing you another episode here of our podcasts. Today is a really exciting one. I'm going to do a little introduction first, so you know who's with me here in the not in the studio, via Zoom studios. Today I have Kristin Vukovic, who joins me as author of the upcoming novel, The Cheesemaker's Daughter, which I have right here. I can show everyone the cover, set to release this August, about a woman returning to her homeland of Croatia, specifically in the Island of Pag, after her father needs her help to save his failing cheese factory. And there's so much more of that story, and we'll get into a lot today, but also just giving everyone a teaser because we'll talk about how you all should definitely purchase and read this in the next few months. So a brief biography first. So Kristin has written for the New York Times, BBC Travel, Travel and Leisure, Coastal Living, Virtuoso, the magazine, Hemispheres, The Daily Beast, AFAR, I'm not sure if I'm saying AFAR, thank you. Connecticut Review and Public Books, amongst many others. An early excerpt of her novel was longlisted for the Cosmonauts Avenue Inaugural Fiction Prize. She was named a 40 under 40 honoree by the National Federation of Croatian Americans Cultural Foundation and received a Zlatna Penkala, or Golden Pen, award for her writing about Croatia. Kristin holds a BA in literature and writing and an MFA in nonfiction writing from Columbia University, and was editor-in-chief of Columbia, a journal of literature and art. She grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota, and currently resides in New York City with her husband and daughter. So welcome, Kristin.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're really super excited to have you. I myself am a reader, so I loved that I heard you were writing a book being published here in the States about Croatia, a fiction novel, which I thought was really awesome. So I'm super excited to hear more about it and just the process behind it, all of it. And you have such a wonderful background, and your, expertise is really, really amazing. So I feel like the first question for you is if you could tell us about yourself, your connection to Croatia, all of that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I have a long-standing obsession with Croatia, which I think definitely stems from my family background. I grew up going to visit my grandparents actually in Dayton, Ohio, and so my father was born here, but my grandparents were from Croatia, and so they would speak Croatian at home. But it was a time when it wasn't popular to be from Eastern Europe, and people really Americanized. It was really something where they didn't want my dad to speak English with an accent, and I always felt that loss. There were cultural elements, of course, passed down through sort of osmosis, but also through largely the food, which was, obviously my grandmother was an amazing cook and an amazing, made these cookies in stacks and used to put them in the garage like in these. And so, so it was really something that felt familiar, but just out of reach for me. In addition to the fact that nobody seemed to be able to pronounce my surname, Vuković, for obviously people who know that part of the world. So, I think it really fueled my decision to become, to study the area, to learn. You mentioned Columbia. I was very fortunate to be able to take, don't test me on this right now, but I was able to take Croatian there, and I studied abroad at Centar za strane jezike in Zagreb and Dubrovnik for a summer. And, over more than 24 visits to Croatia, have gleaned a lot made sense to me going back. And I was able to incorporate that into my travel writing career, and also, my first published essay was an essay about my grandmother's cooking. So it really kind of like runs through the body of my work, I would say.
Definitely. And what I loved about I got to read the book, everyone. I'm, happy to report, but I was able to relate a lot because what you just shared and how you write it speaks volumes to, I think, so many of us who are Croatian American or Croatian Australian, or, you know, wherever we are in the world, and who it felt like we aren't maybe Croatian at times, nor are we American at times. We're sort of somewhere in this middle. It's all meaningful and it matters a lot to us. So I think you do such a great job of relating to that part of people. And I know I felt a lot. I could resonate with so much of how.
That's so meaningful to me, because it was something that I felt like, you know, it is not my own lived experience, but I have friends who've had that experience, and certainly my research and nonfiction background came into that in trying to capture really the essence of that divided self. And how I think that people, you know, my husband actually is closer in the character of Marina in the sense that he left India at age 17 and came to America, and kind of has that, interestingly enough, despite obviously very different cultural background, very different immigrant experience, not related to any conflicts or wars, but I think there are many people who will relate to that aspect of Marina's character and experience.
Yes, I agree. I think it was, you do such a great job of it that it really gets you to the core, I think, of that middle world we all feel like we're in so often. But so then we're curious about your writing career. You need to let us know how you ended up in writing. Yes. What do you enjoy most? What kind of led you into this world?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, I think if I'm looking back really early, I was with friends and cousins, like always putting on shows, like drafting scripts and kind of acting things out. So I think storytelling has always been in my blood. And I actually think like Croatians are very adept at that's kind of in the nature of all of these oral histories that have been passed down. And I certainly, in the research of this novel, took advantage of that as well. I think that, you know, I just have always had a passion for reading. And I didn't really realize that you could have a career as a writer. And so it was something that was kind of like, you know, the practical immigrant father, you know, with the immigrant roots, sort of being like, we're you know, you need to find a job, you make the money, you find the job. And I'm like, freelance writing was not something that was in that lexicon, right? So I think I really owe a great debt of gratitude to like my mentors at Columbia, and really being kind of showing me the way that there was in fact a path to, you know, living a creative life. And you know, it obviously is not all creative. Like I've done many other things, including like, you know, sponsored content and different editorial positions at magazines. But there's a way to cobble together a storytelling life. And I just, you know, it was like a whole new world opened up for me with that. And I think that was really just where my passion was. That was something that I could never like shake off. It just didn't feel like a hobby. Like writing for a hobby is lovely as well, and journaling is great. I just felt like I wanted to really that to be my life. So
yeah. And I think that part, I'm so glad you shared that, because I work with young people as well. And I often come across so many young people who are concerned, like, can I do this? Am I able to have a career in writing? It's something I love doing. I don't want it to just be a hobby. So I'm really glad that you're speaking to that point, because our young listeners can learn that maybe there is a way where, you know, there is a way to do this, and that's great. And seeing that, you know, firsthand through your experiences is really wonderful. So in that note, like, how did you first get published? How did that all kind of come about?
You know, it's really funny. I had a real streak of beginner's luck in the sense that my very first published essay was called Paprednjak, which was about my grandmother's cooking, and then going back actually to Croatia and discovering this biscuit that had the sweetness and spice and the blend of.
They're delicious.
They're delicious. You know, and really, like, my grandfather was born in Karlovac, so you know, it was just discovering all of the it's incredibly different parts of Croatia that, you know, have these different cultural heritages. Mine being much more influenced by that Austro-Hungarian versus like the Venetian and, in Dalmatia that I know you have also roots in Pag.
Yes, I do.
So, very different from place to place. And so, so I think in the beginning there was that streak of luck. And I remember my mentor saying like, it doesn't always happen like this, where you submit an essay and it just gets published. And of course I learned that through many, many rejections after that. But I think that ultimately somebody told me, it's 99% perseverance. And I really do think like it takes a lot to develop. It's hard when something gets rejected and it's, close to your heart. And it's, it's something that I think when you do take it to a professional level, or you want to take it beyond it being just a pastime or a hobby, which is a lovely thing to just have to nourish your creative self, that is a huge part of it. And it does not mean that you're a bad writer. It means that it wasn't right for that publication at this particular time. It wasn't, it may not be in the zeitgeist. It may be that somebody, it's not fitting for a number of reasons. It may also be that like you need to put it in a drawer and wait and improve it later, and come back to it. And maybe that piece isn't ready to be seen, or maybe you're not ready to write it yet. I think there's really a aspect of readiness that this is, in this book, for example, and we can go into the story of the inception of this novel. And it's nice to say like, I'd like to publish a book by X time, and when I'm this age, and all of these are wonderful goals to have, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the book is ready to be published at that point. So I think, in terms of building a writing career, I think flexibility is key. I did a lot of other types of writing, including, like I said, sponsored content, which is much more on the marketing side of things. And that pays much better than a lot of the creative work, but is also working different muscles that are very good to develop. So I think you just have to be very fluid, especially in today's landscape, if you're looking to develop the writing career.
No, I think that's amazing advice. I'm so happy that you shared all the aspects of it, and the realization that, it is about, is this the right time? Is this the right person? Is this finding the right person who will want and relate to the story and want to get that published. So I think that's really important for young people getting into the writing field to understand that part, that it's not them. It is about, so much more at times too.
Absolutely. I mean, and just to share one more thing on that, like part of a writing group, and this friend and colleague got a very disappointing rejection. It was one of those like just close, like just barely missing. We loved so much about it, and and it was like those kind of no's are hardest, I think, because it's like, but you loved it, and couldn't we just push it over the line for whatever you were looking for? We like, writing is revising, like, right? Why can't we just revise it? But sometimes there's that ephemeral, just like, I didn't connect to it enough. I didn't fall in love with it enough. And, what you really want, especially in a book project, is somebody to really fall in love with it, because there's a lot of challenge that goes through the editorial process and beyond. And you really need champions who are going to understand and appreciate the work and be champions for that story.
Yeah. And that's great, because I think knowing that someone did that for this book, I think now, because we really have to hear about this, the beginning to the end of this. And so knowing that there was someone that really saw that in this book, I'm so glad, because we can now all get our hands on it and see it and learn it and love it as well. So the first thing that I'm going to ask you about this book, and you are right, I do need to plug my Island of Pag. That is a big central character of this book.
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
So I think that was a really cool part. So all of the listeners from Pag will really resonate with this, but also all over Croatia. I think it's just, like I said, speaks volumes to so many different experiences. So what inspired you? It's such a great novel. So what can you share about inspiration around this book?
Well, thank you so much. I was really like, whenever people have a close connection to Pag or like the immigrant experience that's similar to Marina's, I kind of hold my breath and I'm like, I got it right.
It was so, I mean, I'm not going to obviously spoil anything, but even just the initial descriptions of the island, I felt like I was there. So yes.
Well, I'm hoping that it transports people there who may never visit the island.
Yes.
May not be familiar with Croatia at all. That was definitely a driving thing for me. This idea came to me back in, believe it or not, 2011, talking about timing. I was on a cheese reporting festival assignment for the now defunct Croatian Chronicle, Hrvatska Chronika. And it was early in my reporting days, and I was just sort of like cutting my teeth on various reporting assignments, and this one came up, and I thought, well, this is great. I've never been to this island, and I don't know a lot about Croatian cheese. So after that assignment, I'll just say that it ended with people dancing on the tables, and I thought I should eat more often. So it was like, this is great. This is great. And the original premise for me was, I was obsessed with the divided island, the fact that it's divided between two counties, and it has such a fascinating history, 3 dialects on the island, and I thought, like, could have 2 rival cheesemakers on this divided Croatian island, sort of have and so that was really the beginning of it. It just kind of like, but I didn't have the narrative heart of it. That it really was like, no, it's not about these 2 men which still exists in the novel. There's still 2 rival cheesemakers, but it's really Marina's story. And I wanted to kind of write a reverse assimilation narrative, in the sense that we have a lot of stories about people coming to America and their struggles assimilating. I wanted to write about what happens when you go home. What happens when you go home to a place that's no longer of the same name, and that has changed in a way that, of course, whenever you go back to whatever home that you're from, if you've moved elsewhere, you've changed, it's changed. It's very different, I think, for a character to go back to, it was Yugoslavia when she left. When she comes back, it's Croatia. It's set in the year before Croatia joins the European Union. And so it's yet another time when Croatia is having an identity change itself. So I was really interested in that kind of intersection. And it was something that, setting it on this island, which I really feel is unique within Croatia. And then the aspect of cheese felt just consistently compelling enough for me to continue to pursue writing a whole book about it. So
yes. Yeah. I agree that the identity aspect, the relearning of self. I love how you mentioned the relearning of country, things like that being such an integral part of the book. I think is really where so many people are going to relate, because we've all, whatever our experience has been, we've all gone through something like that, some level of having to re-identify ourselves, because life happens and things change and we change and places change. So I really loved that part of the novel as well. And I love that you also got to research it by actually going out to Pag, eating some of that cheese that is very well renowned. So love that. So certainly you did a lot of research, but what are some of the things that really went into it? I know, you went to the island, but what were some of the really fun or maybe difficult aspects of the researching of this novel for you?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, I mean, I would say my nonfiction background, the journalism, definitely was a great aid in doing the research for this, in the sense that I love oral history. I was able to really not just do research online and go to the library, but it was like when I was going back to interview people. And I'm also lucky in that I have a couple of friends and colleagues. Like, one of my friends left when the war was breaking out. Another friend actually was a refugee on this island, so had that experience to share with me. My maid of honor was a refugee from Sarajevo. So I have all of these different things that kind of were in me, not directly from one person, but all of these immigrant experiences that I had collected over many years. And and also just the aspect of learning about cheese, which I really had no concept of before I started this travel. So really, like, and going in the factories, and I wrote a pretty in-depth feature for BBC Travel about pastizir. Yep. So that was really that was fun, and also amazing to just be able to go out with the shepherds, to go into the factories, to meet some of the small producers also who are making cheese in a different way than the factories as well, and really get under the skin of the island was an amazing aspect of this journey for this book. I think a challenge, as you might imagine, with 3 dialects spoken on the island, and the fact that my Croatian is not fluent, it's conversational at best and now. So I think that ultimately that was a barrier, but I was also very lucky that I made a number of friends and contacts who could help me kind of parse out not just the language, but like, this novel is really all the richer for their input in terms of like little cultural things that are things that you could never read about in a book.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm shout out to all of them then for really, getting into it. Cause I do think that like you captured that all of those things so well. I mean, being from the island, I understand a lot of that stuff too. So, that really, I think came across. And even just the way the cheese is made, I think you captured it so well, because it is such a unique process in so many ways. And as you mentioned, in different places across the island, it's made in so many different ways as well. So I think that was really so moving. And honestly, the descriptions around it, I think really give you a good glimpse into what that world is like there. So yeah, kudos to them for their support.
Yeah, their support was absolutely
yes.
It would have been nearly the, I could not have sourced this without those people. So it's really my love letter. I say this in the acknowledgements. It's my love letter to the Island of Pag, because it's, it really is, with the different aspects of that pastoral connection to the land, and this rich history of cheesemaking on the island, and not to get technical about it, but just there's still, for me, a little bit of mystery about it, right?
Yes.
And I think there is this kind of like still a part of it. I'm like, there's still some mysteries in that cheese for me, definitely.
Yes. I would agree with that. There are a lot of people that still won't give you all the information.
That's right. It's like the special sauce, like we'll give you enough where you have the like general idea of how it's made. But then there's always that little bit, and I talk about this in the book, that little bit of alchemy that just kind of like where nature contains some mystery and how it ages and how it turns out. So
yeah, agreed. And I think you do such a great job of describing the nature of Croatia. I mean, obviously the island of Pag has such a specific nature to it, but just overall what exists in those regions, and why food and all of that, wine, even all these things become so unique and special to the world as they engage with a lot of that. Those products. So that's really great. So I need to ask about characters, first characters, if they're based on any real people, because certainly I felt like they could have been based on some real people I know.
Well, that's good.
Because I was like, okay, yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, certainly, as I said, it's not based on any one person. I would say, like, there have been certain influences in my life. You might be surprised to know. First of all, Nicola, who's one of the characters, is Marina's father. So Marina's the main character, and Nicola is her father. That is actually my great-grandfather's name. Okay. My grandfather was Ivan, which is the other cheesemaker. And so a lot of these names were taken, but actually Nicola's character is largely influenced by, when I first moved to New York City, I was very blessed to find an amazing building that was rent stabilized, apartment that was rent stabilized. And the landlady was Greek Albanian. Mm-hmm. And she was like very, kind of had aspects of Nicola's character. So I feel like she was kind of this strong figure, and interestingly, people might be interested that like his character was influenced by a woman, but she really, I mean, I feel like there are definitely parts of her in Nicola, I feel like.
Okay. I love that, like life sort of, showing up in art in so many ways. Love that. Or also, I mean, not just people, but is anything in the book like off of a memory or moment? Is there anything that connected you maybe from real life into what you wrote about?
Yeah, I think that when I was writing this, actually, I now have a 5.5-year-old daughter, and I was like, at that age where I was deciding whether or not I wanted to have a child. And I think that it was very, this sort of like feeling, Marina comes back to the island and she's feeling kind of like her marriage is falling apart. My marriage was not falling apart, but it was this feeling of like everything's up in the air. And so while Marina's circumstances are very different than mine, I think I tried to infuse that feeling of like, what do I do next into her character? Because she's flailing at the beginning of the novel, and she's, coming off of, a huge devastating loss. And I felt like I wanted to kind of capture that turmoil in the beginning of major decisions that had to be made. So, yeah.
No, that certainly makes a lot of sense. And in what I read with her journey, that really correlates to a lot of that experience when some of us have difficulties we're encountering and uncertain about what's to come, the emotions that come with all of that as well. So I think anyone, even if it wasn't specific to that exact story, we've all been in a place like that, I think, in our lives, for sure.
Yeah.
Great.
And that was something that, like I said, my circumstances weren't parallel to hers, but I do feel like the emotion that's infused that can translate into a number of different circumstances. And we have these kind of, turning points in our lives, right? And sometimes they hit at different ages for different people. Yep. But I do think that that's a thread that people will relate to as well.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. So, when you're a writer, certainly you get very connected to what you're writing, and things can be, I think, sometimes challenging or difficult, even with the writing, for you to work through or overcome. So what do you think was the most challenging for you in writing this book?
Oh, the most challenging thing, I think, honestly, because this isn't a book that is based on my own experience, it took me a long time to actually come up with the story I wanted to tell. And that was, like, I remember there were different versions of this story. So at first I had two female protagonists. One was American and one was Croatian. That eventually merged into Marina being Croatian American, which worked much better. At one point, it was alternating between, her father had like chapters that were in close third, so essentially in his perspective, and then alternating with hers, because I felt he could speak to a certain part of the history she didn't have access to, because he was like, obviously, after the war with the privatization, like she wasn't involved in that. But then ultimately I had an amazing, it was just this unicorn workshop that was in 2020, that was in Florida. And Jean Kwok, who is a New York Times bestselling author, kind of was like, this is Marina's story. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. This is Marina's story.
Okay.
When she said that, it kind of just, it flowed a lot better, because then it felt like her father obviously is still a huge part of this story, but it felt like once it was sort of put all in her perspective, in the close third, and then, the other characters, through how she was going through this world and through these experiences, it just kind of, it flowed much better.
Yeah,
So.
no, that's great. And I think it's so interesting, being let in on the process of a lot of how this comes to be too. So thank you for sharing that too, of like having others who might look things over, and be able to, yeah. So that's wonderful to hear just the way that it works. It's not something that happens overnight.
So did I tell you that I just sat down and wrote this all in one, like, it took me a couple of days to write this. No, I'm
yes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's really something I think, and I've learned this from like best-selling authors, and I've been very lucky to have them share their experiences. It's like, they are always having people look at their work. It's not like you get to a certain point in your career and then all of a sudden you don't have to revise. Writing is revising. It's always being open to feedback, and it's also being open to like listening to when something's not working. And
that's a great point.
Setting it aside for a while. Sometimes that means starting over, unfortunately, which is really hard. I lost like a lot of words. Like, I don't remember how many, but I remember cutting his chapters and being like, oh, that's so much writing. But it all informed the final story, because her father, as you've read the advanced reader copy, like her father's perspective is very much still, and he's very much still a huge character. So
yeah. No, I'm so glad that you're mentioning so much of the writing process today as well, because I think those that are curious about the world, wanting to get into the world, I think that's such fair input to hear, that it isn't this, because I think sometimes there is this idea that like, oh, an author comes up with this idea and boom, there's the book, but we forget that there's so much.
I can tell you, I've never heard a story like that. I mean, I've heard like maybe that it takes a few months to get a draft, but that's really also, even the most prolific and quick writers are not just banging out a perfect draft at all. So.
And I think that part is really actually just cool, because I think it just shows you like there is a process. There's a person behind this. It isn't like, this sort of miracle kind of conception to things. There's work and there's effort and there's people. So I really appreciate you really taking us through that journey as well today. So anyone who's really interested can really get an idea of what that world is like. Okay, takeaways. So someone reads the book. What are you hoping that they take away from the experience, the story, all of it?
Yeah, I feel like anybody who's ever felt displaced, whether emotionally or physically, will relate to this novel. And I think, I'm hoping that there's a spirit of reconciliation and rebirth at the end of the novel, which I think is hopefully heartening and inspiring as well. And the fact that, oftentimes we have more similarities than differences. And it's really worth looking at how working together is often more fruitful than these petty jealousies that exist in my novel, that oftentimes act as a stumbling block, right? Yeah. Like, I think that it's really this is about really like the island coming together at the end. Which I think is something that I think when people come together, it can be very beautiful.
Yep. Yeah. And what I love about working here with Croatians Online and seeing that is that I'm really learning so much about community and how community comes together. And so that takeaway, I think, is so valuable for all of us who are out in the diaspora, having left Croatia or being born out there, but having these roots to Croatia, knowing that there is such a strong sense of we are a community through and through in the end.
And that is so valuable. And I think it's something that when Marina, is sort of coming back to her island home, something that she grows to value in a way that she never did when she lived there.
Totally wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing so much about your words on the book and your writing process and everything. But since we are Croatians Online, I need to ask you, what do you love most about Croatian culture?
Oh yes, I mean so many things. I've been very, very lucky to, through my travel writing, go to many places around Croatia, and in fact, one of my Croatian friends was like, "You've been to more parts of Croatia than me," and I'm from there, and I was like, "Well, it's the kind of thing where like, when you're from there, you're probably like you're going back to your specific." She's from Zadar. You go, to your specific place, and you like have your friends, and then it's not like you're doing like a ton of side trips necessarily to like Istria or like Dalmatian
Coast. True. It's true. You're right.
So I think, I kind of am coming at it with like my roots are much more distant. And so, so many things that I love about Croatian culture. I mean, there's so much diversity in such a small place. I think the island of Pag, like I said, is so unique with, even you look at the styles of folk dress from place to place, and linguistic differences from place. I mean, even just as I've reported on different parts of the cuisine and the various historical influences, it's pretty incredible that such a small country contains this multitude. So, I mean, there's no like one thing I can point to. I just have a real appreciation and love for, there's constantly things that I'm learning every time I go back, and these like sort of microcultural differences that might exist. Like I was just in Dubrovnik, and I was talking to this colleague of mine, and he's from Carmen, the area, Dubrovnik. And like, how they only went to the Buja in the, that specific area, not the other Buja. And like all of these like little things that as these hyper local things are so fascinating. So I'm constantly excited to learn about those things, and every time I go back, like I said, I learn something new. And I
love that. It's so true. Yeah. It's so true. It really is. And we love that you love Croatia enough to have written such a great book that we are so excited.
Thank you.
Is also going to let the whole world in on our country and all of its beautiful things. So we're really, really, really excited about this. So first and foremost, how do people get their hands on this? What can we do to get our hands on this, support you, all of it?
Thank you. Thank you. Well, so a lot of people don't know this kind of how the sausage is made aspect of books, but now it's become very important to do what's called pre-ordering. So basically you order the book, and then like, let's say you order through Amazon, it will arrive to your doorstep on August 6th, which is the release date. Why that's important is because it's my publisher's, it's distributed by Simon & Schuster. So they watch those numbers, and it actually determines where the book is stocked across the US. They're looking at those numbers. Like now. So go to Amazon and look up the Cheesemaker one, or Barnes & Noble, or like you can request it at your local indie, whichever. There are lots of different methods of pre-ordering. And then another great thing is, if you like the book, it's great after the August 6th pub date if you could leave a review on Amazon, because that is something that helps the visibility in the huge world of Amazon online, that that we're hoping to get up in that category of like, where then it becomes more searchable. This is all algorithm driven.
Yes.
So that there's that. And then also I will be doing, if anybody is in the New York City area, on August 6th at P&T Knitwear, I will be doing a launch event. So that will be very exciting. And then also on August 30th, I will be coming full circle back to Otok-Pag. And there's August 30th, they're having a cheese festival in Cologne. And I will be there with my family, and I will have some books, but also there will be apparently some media situation, and I will be there. But whatever is happening on the 30th on Pag, I will.
You're there. I love that. I love that you have events on both parts of the world. I love that. Yes.
And I will have also like West Coast stuff, and
great.
One or two more East Coast things. You can stay tuned with KristinVukovic.com or my social media handles. to keep updated on all of those.
We will for sure. And we're going to make sure on our website, we'll post some of those links once everything gets set up with our interview online. We'll have the links to Amazon pre-orders, Barnes Noble's pre-orders, and your website, everything, so that listeners can click around and support. I myself have pre-ordered, even though I did get the advanced reader's copy. I have also pre-ordered because I know how meaningful those pre-orders are to authors.
And that book also has a different back cover.
Okay. I'm starting a collection. I love it.
And then the also, that's the like uncopy edit.
Yes.
Hasn't gone through all the editorial stuff, so that will be the final finished version that you'll get.
So excited. And we're going to make sure that we'll be sharing along up until your release date as well on our website, and, hoping that people will certainly pick up a copy, because I definitely think it's well worth it for all of us in the diaspora to read this book. It really, really meant a lot. And we thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
I thank you.
It's a huge high compliment from you, especially having ties to Pag.
Yes.
And, I remember our initial conversation and I thought, my God, what are the chances?
I know, what a small world. But I guess the Croatian world can be small, even though we're,
Mali Svijet,
Yes, Mali Svijet is right. Yes.
So it's really like, it is an interesting thing. This book has brought a lot of, connections in interesting places. And I was really grateful you related to this on a personal level as well. And that was really, I think that's the dream for a writer, when you have that interaction with somebody that really gets what you were trying to do and relates.
No, you did a great job, and I really am excited to have people read it. Maybe we'll even be able to, I know you're going to be really busy, but maybe sometime in the fall when the book is released, we'll be able to bring you back.
Absolutely.
And we could talk more about it once it's out there. Cause we don't want to give anything away.
Right. Then we'll be able to actually talk about, and then I'll be, past the publication date, which will also be like, this is my first kind of experience through this whole process. So, I've had experiences from other authors that I've been able to, get some advice on things, but it's always when you're going through it, it's your own unique experience of how, and the world is rapidly changing with publishing as well. So it's all a big learning curve, but it's exciting.
It's so exciting. We are excited for you, and we're going to be definitely watching and paying attention and seeing how the next couple months go. Thank you, Kristin, once again for everything. We're looking forward to this. I'm going to show the book one more time so everyone sees. It's a beautiful cover.
I love that cover.
This cover.
I'm like,
really great.
It's great. I'm like, in my head, and I wasn't sure how much input I was going to be able to have, but I'm like, I hope there will be sheep.
Yes, I'm so glad there were sheep.
I came up with that cover. I was like, that's kind of like, I couldn't have exactly articulated it, but it felt very right for the book.
Yes, totally. It's a perfect cover to this book. So this is the book again. Thank you so much, Kristin. We are so excited to watch this happen, and we're hoping that more people will be reading and following along, and we'll be in touch.
Very exciting. Thank you so much again.
Of course.